sound effects.
Overhead. There he goes, somewhere hot and warm. Or maybe somewhere cold. Who knows? Welcome to the podcast.
Meanwhile,
sorry.
back with reality.
Thank you.
How long that'll last?
I'm not sure how long that will last, considering the set list this week. But there we go.
Yes, this time around we've got the new Todd Rundgren album, State, which we are rolling over from last podcast.
Yep.
will.i.am's latest album called Willpower.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Earle. Latest album, Low Highway, album by a young lady called Kacey Musgraves, which I've just forgotten the title of suddenly.
Same different trailer, same park.
Yeah.
I think that's wrong.
The latest album from the French indie rock band Phoenix,
Yeah.
Which is called Bankrupt.
Now, that one I didn't know.
And the new album from the Yeah, Mosquito.
That's the one.
So, without further ado, as they say, the latest album from Todd Rundgren, and his first album in a while that's actually on a kind of, semi-proper record label. In fact, so much so the kind of record label basically signed him and kind of basically gave him a deadline to have an album out, saying,
Okay.
we want to release the album now. This is the date we need it for. And so, apparently, what Todd did was, as he usually does in these kind of things, just kind of thought, okay, what kind of record do I want to make? Preferably something different from the last one I made. Which was a kind of arena rock record, essentially. And so we have, I think, what we can describe as a kind of eclectic-sounding record.
It is a very eclectic-sounding record. To try and put Todd Rundgren into any modern genre defies possibilities, if any possible. Is that him on your T-shirt?
Yes.
Yay! Bing! We got ping-tastic on this one. It defies any logic or expectation. So, Todd Rundgren's album, State. I didn't mind this, actually. If you sort of get into the groove of it. Yeah. There are some interesting tracks on here, and some he takes us to some interesting states of mind as well.
Yes,
obviously playing on the title. Have to admit, found the first track, Imagination, almost put me off. Almost made me hit the stop button and go, no, I'm not listening to this. It goes on for about 8 minutes.
It does go on for 8 minutes.
It's very repetitive. And it's very self-absorbed. But if anyone knows Todd, well, there we are. But actually, thank goodness for Serious and In My Mouth, the two tracks that follow it, because it really does bring it all back together. Yep. Which, I thought they were good tracks. My favourite has to be, it's a toss-up between Ping Me, obviously, and Angry Bird, for sheer delight and comedy lyrical stylings.
Yes, Angry Bird particularly is rather silly.
I did wonder if the colloquialism there would be lost on the predominantly American audience, but probably not.
No, I don't think so.
No, there you are. Also, I found that the final few tracks on the album, again, in the same way that the Serious and In My Mouth, kind of brought it all back together again as well. And I actually quite enjoyed the last track, Surreality.
Yes, actually,
one of my favourites, I think, from this album.
It's I would agree. It's actually probably, quite possibly my favourite album on the album. Favourite track on the album.
Yeah.
And obviously I quite like the first song, but by the same token, I can understand why it would be off-putting. It is strange to basically kick off the album with an 8.5 minute song, which starts off very reminiscent of kind of old synth kind of prog rock Todd. So you've got not that kind of sequenced kind of keyboard thing going on, and then you get this kind of bizarre kind of Black Sabbath guitar riff. It is the exact same riff from Black Sabbath, kind of dun 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 kind of thing. I think it will work quite well live, actually.
Yes,
I'd rather that because it's that kind of has enough pomp, if you like.
It has the pomp of an intro to a live set.
Yeah.
You know, here he comes. Oh no, here he comes.
Yeah. So I think I like that. Yeah. I agree with you with Serious. One of the things I found most interesting about this record, because obviously he did say that one of the things he'd done for this album was he wanted to kind of, in a way, reconnect with all the kind of artists that have been referencing him recently, and try and get back to that kind of more experimental kind of nature in sounds, at least in the studio. So he wanted to kind of bring in a kind of some contemporary kind of feel to the overall all sound. So he did that by apparently going on YouTube and just zapping various things and just following the sideline and just kind of going, oh, that's connected to that, that's connected to that. And anytime he liked anything, he would immediately stop listening to it for fear of being overly influenced by it and just copying it.
Okay.
And so I think that's what kind of sits behind a lot of this album. And I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Bizarrely with Serious, it both works and doesn't work in equal measure, because whilst it does sound contemporary, it also sounds very 80s.
I like that bang 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 bang.
Yeah.
Bang 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 bang. Guitar.
Yeah.
Obviously.
but kind of reminiscent of the with Nile Rodgers, particularly Nile Rodgers' period when he was producing Duran Duran. Peter Gabriel, also similar kind of sounding. But no, that's not a criticism, because I think it's a really good pop song.
Yeah.
And of things on the album, it's probably the most complete traditional song on the record, apart from the ballad "Something for Nothing," which I think's another really lovely song towards the end of the album. I should say, "Ping Me" is quite funny. I think the lyrics are probably the worst thing about it, actually.
There's no need to ring me.
Yeah, the lyrics are a bit painful.
Yes.
Other things...
I think he's heard the podcast.
Possibly, yeah. Smoke and Kaleidoscope, I think, are both kind of interesting in trying to get that kind of dance music influence into his sound, if you like. Although, again, I think Kaleidoscope... for me, like you with the first track, I think Kaleidoscope probably goes on for perhaps a minute and a half, too long, because it's a similar theme and it works quite well. But then you're kind of thinking, no, it should be the ending now.
Yeah.
And also just from pure ridiculousness, Party Liquor with its woo 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 kind of dance beat, which is both dreadful and wonderful in equal measure.
Yes,
frankly. But yeah, I think it's a good album rather than a great Todd album, but is definitely one that has grown on me more as I've listened to it on repeat listens.
I'd agree. A repeat listen is worth it. Probably, I speaking not as a Todd fan, I actually found this album quite accessible once I got past the first track, obviously.
Yes.
So one for the casual listener, perhaps.
Well, maybe. Yeah, who knows?
I wouldn't say, but yeah.
Moving on, whilst sticking with the vague dance theme, we move on to a gentleman who is a almost permanent fixture on BBC television channels these days.
And the internet.
I think only Nigel Farage has actually appeared more on television than will.i.am in the past 6 months. Yeah. I don't know what Farage's musical output's like, but you know,
it's probably traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm here all week.
So yes, we have Mr. will.i.am, previously of the parish of the Black Eyed Peas and other such things, and as we do from time to time when we review albums that are kind of the ones that people are going to be talking about, there is a sense of dread when it comes to listening to them.
Yeah.
A sense of dread that was to a degree met with this record, it has to be said, although I will kind of say that with some kind of provisos. Whatever you think of him and the music, it has to be said he's obviously a talented producer and can certainly craft things together well, and of this type of dance music that is pretty much centred around the use of auto-tune and recycling classic dance beats and stuff like that. He does do it very well.
Yeah.
And so whilst quite a bit of this record is monotonous, there are some bits of it that I actually didn't mind. A couple of things near the start. This is Love with Eva somebody. Can't remember who that is. The thing with Britney Spears, funny enough, Scream and Shout, which I actually quite liked.
Yep.
And there's a thing with Nicole Scherzinger. Actually, World is Crazy. Or,
yes.
Or Far Away from Home.
Yep.
I actually didn't mind either. And it's all right. And elsewhere, obviously, you've got ridiculous stuff like geeking and.
I like that.
But the lyrics are quite funny.
Yeah.
And actually, elsewhere there's a few good lyrics.
I liked it because of the lyrics.
Yeah.
I have to admit.
Ghetto has good lyrics as well. Actually,
yeah.
So it's not really my thing.
No,
it has to be said.
No.
And things like Let's Go.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and things like Let's Go and Freshie were just awful. But it was, for what it is, it's fine.
I was quite surprised by this album. I thought I'd go as far. We don't listen to that many albums of this genre, but I'd go as far to say this is my dance album of the year. I actually found it really. I don't know. I like you. I went into it with a certain anticipation and trepidation. #willpower. I thought, oh, how appropriate. However, the first 4 tracks in particular just blew me away. It was like Friday night at the club I probably hate going to, but still, it was a really, really uplifting listen. I really enjoyed it. So I think, all right, okay, maybe it's not my dance album of the year, but it's certainly my guilty pleasure of the year. I actually thoroughly enjoyed listening to this record, which has completely bowled me over and knocked all my compasses out of sync. No, really enjoyed this record. Yes, it does sag somewhere in the middle. You mentioned a couple of tracks a moment ago where perhaps it also lyrically falls down too, and the production does slow up. However, there are some really great tracks on here. First 4 tracks, definitely. Great times are coming. The World is Crazy. You mentioned Ghetto, Far Away from Home. All really good banging tunes.
As they say.
As they used to say.
As the kids say.
As the kids used to say when they were kids. I actually found this record not entirely to my taste all the way through, but actually quite an enjoyable listen. My God.
I don't know, one podcast for praising Justin Timberlake, and now now we're not totally slagging off.
Now we're not.
will.i.am.
Exactly. But it's as you say, it's the production values that are there, and it's what make it. Lyrically, it does fall down in places. Musically, it's not always so great. The collaborations, sometimes they work superbly. Oh, Britney Spears! Who'd have thought in that mould? Yeah, brilliant. More of that from Britney Spears would be great for Britney Spears, I think. But then there are times where you think, that was a bit flat, that one. But for the most part, yeah, really enjoyable record. Gosh, where'd you go from there?
I believe we go country.
Oh, that's probably the only place we can go now.
Yeah. Where do you go after dance? Yeah. You go to country.
You go back to the country.
And this time we go to Steve. I think it's the first time we've reviewed a Steve Earle album, actually. Because we reviewed his son Justin Earle's album last year.
Oh yeah, we did. That was his son.
Yeah,
of course. Not too dissimilar to this record.
Which was an album I liked.
Yeah, I remember.
Yes, and this is latest from Papa Earle with the Dukes and the Dutchesses. Partly because there's no 2 ladies in the band, one of which being Mrs. Earle.
Oh, right, okay.
Otherwise known as Alison Moore.
Okay.
Yes, so country. Or folk country, really. I think Steve Earle's always been someone that's been on the kind of fringe of both, really, rather than a pigeonholed, straightforward country person.
It's very rock in places. That's alt rock.
Yeah.
In places. So it's not strictly country, because there's another country album we're going to review in a moment, which is different. So it's not strictly country. It's got the folk influence. It's got the sort of alt rock influences in there as well. Again, I found this record, actually lyrically I found it quite funny in places as well. I don't know if that was intentional. No, I did. I found it really enjoyable. And again, it was a short album.
It is a short album, about 40 minutes. Yeah,
we talked about Todd and will.i.am. They were both quite longish records, but so it was quite a short album. Always gets a bonus from us. and I found some of the songs actually really just quite pleasant to listen to, and some of them more engaging than others. If I had to pull out favourites, this is tough. Calico Country, which is the second track, which I just thought was a nice sort of scene setter. And After Mardi Gras, I think, which is about halfway through the album, also quite enjoyable. How about yourself?
And
21st Century Blues.
Yes, 21st Century Blues.
Which I found very topical as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm assuming you'd also like the flying car reference in that.
I bloody fell over when I heard the flying car reference. That's been my Facebook update every year for New Year for about several years.
I
additional information that you didn't need.
I like this record because, as you say, the thing I've always liked about Steve Earle is his, essentially came from kind of country background. However, has always been heavily influenced by folk and rock as well. In that way, his kind of touch points have always been not too dissimilar from Bruce Springsteen's in that sense. And this album, I think, highlights that kind of, all of those kind of influences. Because, as you say, you've got a couple of tracks where the guitar comes out, so 20th Century Blues, Calico Country, all you've got. While on the same token, you've also got the kind of leaning back to old-style country bluegrass kind of things on, Warren Hellman's banjo and Down the Road Part 2. And also, the key thing which always run through Earle's writing in the same way as Springsteen is he tends to write about stuff and what's going on in the world. So you've got Invisible about a kind of homeless person, being ignored. You've got Burn It Down, which is, a kind of about how companies such as Walmart's the example he uses in here in the song, but mainly because of their bad union or don't like unions and all that kind of thing, and how companies like this come into towns and basically kind of destroy them by taking all the other businesses out. So I think it's I said because it's 40 minutes as well, it kind of rattles along quite nicely, has a nice bit of variety, so you're not kind of getting bored with one particular kind of sound, if you like. And also it's quite touching because the final track's Remember Me, which is him writing a song to his son who was born a couple of years ago, and because obviously Steve Earle was in his 50s when he had him, he's kind of thinking, good chance I won't be around when you kind of grow up, kind of thing. By the time you come to be 20 or whatever, good chance I'm going to be dead. So remember me.
Oh,
kind of thing.
I didn't realise that. That's nice.
So I think it's a good solid Steve Earle album.
Oh, solid. Good. Agree.
Moving on and staying with country but to a young lady who has recently been kind of, I suppose because record companies are kind of looking for the new Taylor Swift now, although this girl has been around for a few years as well. She's 24, I think. And this is, I think, might even be her third or fourth album, in fact.
Right, okay.
Yes, it's definitely, as you said, it's hinted at, this is definitely more country than the Steve Earle album is, in a kind of, what most people would consider to be country.
Yes.
It does have pop tinges.
Yep.
But unlike Taylor Swift, who now mostly has pop music with country tinges, this is still very much country, still the main flavour with pop tinges in. And again, it's another album that's not overly long, and I think it's actually quite a nice record. You've got a couple of things like Merry Go Round, which is I think the first single off it.
Oh, right.
Which has some great lyrics in it.
Yep.
About kind of, as you said, the same trailer park kind of, just looking at that kind of.
I think that's where the title comes from.
People come from,
Same trailer, different park.
And you've got Blowing Smoke, which is almost Sheryl Crow, early Sheryl Crow-like. Back on the Map, which I kind of thought was quite funny. Stupid, which has some woes in it, which I think could be another potential single. And yeah, I kind of thought this was a young lady with a lot of potential.
Yeah, agree entirely. Didn't realise this was her third or fourth album.
I think it is,
because I actually thought she sounds really established in her own music and lyrics, which is very impressive. Again, we've talked about lyrical strength on some of the albums this podcast so far. I think this was the strongest lyrically. I was completely taken into her world by this album. I can't even say that for the Steve Earle album so much, but we're talking a different thing there. But I was completely drawn in by this album. It was an absolutely, utterly enjoyable experience listening to it. I can't really pick out individual tracks. I mean, you've mentioned a couple, because again, the album as a whole it's a solid, but it's quite a super solid record in that it's an enjoyable listen from start to finish. She takes you into her world. It's not necessarily her world all the time, but it's traditional country western in that it is a category of stories about female characters that have even had tough upbringings or have been hard done by, and yet it's different in that it is modern, it is fresh, it does have those pop tinges. It also has some folk, and I'm talking the modern popular folk tinges in there as well, which sounds daft when you're talking about country and western, because surely that is folk music for some, but actually no, it does incorporate some of that modern folk as well that's been very popular over here the last few years.
Well, been very popular everywhere.
And it's getting everywhere
since
now.
Mumford, it's done quite well.
Mumford went international, so it has those elements as well. So if you liked your Mumfords, you'll like this. If you like your Taylor Swift, you'll like this. So it really does sort of tick quite a few. If I had a Venn diagram with various balls within it that she does come under. Really, as I say, really enjoyable record. Possibly my favourite record of the podcast.
Ooh. Interesting.
Yeah, I'll come to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's country done, which leaves us with indie.
Yeah,
and unusual for us. Actually, we've got two albums that would be classified as indie in the podcast. First up being latest album from Phoenix, who were kind of a band that no one really heard of until a few years ago when their album Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix came out in 2009, and then they became very popular with critics and me, because I really liked it well, particularly through their song 1901, which suddenly became really huge, and I think it's used in an advert now, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
And Listomania, which was also a great track off that record. Really solid. Solid. See, we're doing solid again. really solid record that actually kind of broke the mould in the sense that people were kind of going, they're French?
Yeah.
Really? They're French? Because there are pop bands in France. There are pop bands that sing in English.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And yeah. So this is their kind of their follow-up to that. Although it's taken them, I think, almost 5 years to put it together.
Right.
And the question is it any good?
If I can get through the next 2 minutes without saying the phrase French killers, I will be onto a winner. I think it's a really good record. I think it sort of does it sort of draws on various influences and elements of the 1980s. And before. I did hear a bit of Duran. I heard a lot of Pet Shop Boys in this actually as well. And sort of early to mid Depeche Mode. So I thought it sort of pulled those influences together nicely, but did create something new, something that is 2013 and something that's very interesting. As it happens, I saw them perform Entertainment on Jules Holland recently as well.
Yes,
that was a really good performance. they look like a really interesting band to watch as well. Because there's about 5 or 6 of them.
Yep.
All sort of sat down playing different instruments. So very, very current in that respect.
And I think Entertainment's one of the best tracks on the album.
It is one of the best tracks on the album. They begin with that, which is a shame because after that I was trying to sort of pull together perhaps one or two that I also liked. Dakar Noir. There you go, the one with the French title. I enjoyed. I'm bourgeois as well. Sorry. I also enjoyed. So but yeah, sort of classic indie lyrics with that 80s-ish sound. Okay, so I didn't say what I was going to say, but I was reminded it was perhaps a little bit less of the pomposity of this band I'm about to mention, but Empire of the Sun. Do you remember them?
Yeah, I do remember.
A couple of years ago.
Sun, yes.
Very reminiscent of their work as well in places.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison.
Yeah,
I think. I agree in that. I think because I quite liked the previous album, like I was saying. Which was a huge jump on musically from their albums before, I felt. This kind of feels more like a kind of holding pattern, rather than trying to push the envelope any further. However, that's not to say that it's not enjoyable, because I think it is. I think it's a very likeable record. Foot tapping, danceable.
All the way through, yeah.
And as you say, there's hints of numerous artists from the 80s, and I'd even say go further back into the 70s, so Sparks, Roxy Music, even Mr. Rundgren. And this, when it works, I think it works well. So and Entertainment, I think it's really good. I really like the last track, Oblique City.
Yes.
And even the title track, which is the longest track on the album, which has kind of about 4 minutes of electronica.
Bankrupt. It's the instrumental one.
Yeah, and then it kind of falls into almost a kind of folky acoustic ballad for 2.5 minutes at the end, which is kind of bizarre, but actually quite good.
Yeah. That's why I think I like Dakar Noir, because I was and then it went back to form. I was like, okay. So interesting.
Yeah. So yeah.
Indeed. So
yeah. That's a link and a half.
That's a link and a half. See how you shoehorn that in there like a sledgehammer.
Yes. Yes. We move on to the latest album from the Yes, and
Mosquito.
And a very interesting album it is too. Again, from the exact opposite, you could say, almost to Phoenix, who I've just accused of playing safe.
Yeah.
I think the AES have done the opposite.
Absolutely.
And rather than just releasing the same album again, they've kind of gone, well, yeah, we still are essentially an indie band, but hey, let's throw in some dance, let's throw in some gospel choirs, let's throw in the kitchen sink, frankly. So you've got things like Sacrilege starts off as your traditional kind of song, and then halfway through there's kind of big gospel choir comes in and kind of builds and builds and builds, so that at the end when all the kind of guitars and stuff go down, you've just got this kind of gospel choir kind of going mad for it, which is just a cracking start to an album, it has to be said as well. And that kind of, for me, keeps up by the following track, Subway, which has really nice use of the kind of sound of the subway train as almost as the kind of drum beat for the song.
I mentioned them a moment ago, so forgive me. Very reminiscent of Stripped by Depeche Mode. That in fact, it's practically the same rhythm. So no doubt a nod.
So I really like that, and even elsewhere you got things. Is it these paths? What's that song called? It's just really unprepared.
These paths,
which is a kind of straight out dance tune.
Yep.
Which is great. Despair, which I really loved, and Slave, which is a kind of, I suppose, more your typical kind of yes indie tune.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually like this album. It was nice to see them, holding on to what they do well, but still trying to kind of expand their palette, musical palette, to kind of introduce more sounds in, and presumably to keep themselves interested in it as well.
You paused then because I was taking a swig of my drink. I think I need to give this record another listen, because there was quite a lot of new material from them to take in. I didn't enjoy this as much as I thought I would. And perhaps I was one of those people that, despite saying the things you've just said always about other bands, was kind of hoping for some traditional yes. So when those tracks like Sacrilege, well, the first half of that, and Slave made their appearance, I was like, yes, yes. And other times I found my attention perhaps wandering ever so slightly. The final sort of third of the album, though, did sort of pull it back for me. I did enjoy Always.
Yeah.
Which, again, as you say, a different yeahs altogether. And Wedding Song, which was the last track, which you haven't mentioned.
It's sort of slow builder kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, slow, very soft sort of build, and then sort of fades away again. Which I was actually quite captivated by that. But in other places, I found, okay, I do appreciate what they've done. God knows we're always calling bands for not doing it. I guess I just missed a little bit of a rock out this time round.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
So, album of the podcast.
I'm going to tone back my hashtag willpower enthusiasm, and I'm going to say Kacey Musgraves, same trailer, different part. Though I'm probably going to come back to willpower later in the year at some stage.
I'm not sure what mine is, actually, to be perfectly honest. I'm torn between several of the albums.
No, it's been quality, mostly.
But I certainly, simply partly because Kacey Musgraves is the first time I've heard her, I would not be against concurring with your opinion. Ooh, because lovely. All the other artists, I'm already familiar with their music, and so that's, in that sense, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
Even if it is something new.
Yeah, sure.
And Kacey Musgrave, as you say, it's produced a really nice record that's kind of short, quite punchy, quite jolly, and with some really good songwriting on it.
Absolutely.
So, yay, Kacey.
Thanks, Kacey. And thank you.